Okay, we're on Heyamid Beis at the bottom. Heyamid Beis at the bottom. The Mishnah was describing who has an Indian of being Oilul Regel, and at which point does Chinuch kick in. So we had a machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai says it kicks in when a child can ride on a father's shoulder. That's usually about a year old. And Beis Hillel says the time he could walk up from Yerushalayim to the Harabayas. That's when it kicks in. Before that, there's no din of chinuch. After that, there's a din of chinuch. So it says the Gemara at the bottom of Hey Amid Beis, Ezeu cotton, who is considered a cotton, anyone who's not able to go ahead and ride on the shoulder of his one's father. Until this point in time, who brought them? In other words, who was Oilul Regel? Pashtus, the father, right? So how did he get him up there until this time? Rashi says, Ad hocham man maisa ad Yerushalayim miheviu. Someone who's able to go ahead and be outside his mother, he doesn't need his mother anymore. Obviously, if he doesn't need his mother anymore, he'd be able to go ahead and take his father's hands. That from there you be mechanechim. So who brought him to Yerushalayim? So obviously it must be that this child was able to walk. So now you're telling me that until this point in time, who brought him over here? Who brought him up here till this period in time? So let's see Taisvis. No, not yet. Amalei Abaya. Ad hacha until here. Let's go with the Bach. Amalei Abaya. Ad hacha ime the mechayva besimcha asisei. Until here, his mother was mechuyev and simcha brought him. Mikan ve'elech. Then it's the machlokes, the lirkov aviv or to walk. In other words, the assumption in the Havamina was that this child was separated from the mother. So if the child was separated from the mother, clearly he was able to go ahead and walk up, or else he would be separated from his mother. So the Gemara is asking, why does the mitzias over here that you're describing of a child going on a father's shoulders or walking?
You ask Uncle Shmuel, you let me know.
Clearly, it must be that the child was of age. So what's the machlokes? And the answer is no. The mother is mechuyev in simcha, and the mother brought him up, and now it could be a child, an infant. And if it's an infant, then there's no chiyuv. If it's a little older than that and able to ride, then Rabbi Shammai said there is a chiyuv. And Beis Hillel says no, riding on his shoulder is not enough of a chiyuv. He has to actually grasp the father's hands and go up. So now this is a question of the Indian of simcha. We brought this in when we did the Rambam. The mitzvah of being of a woman generally is not to go ahead and indulge in meat. Everyone has simcha a different way. The samachta b'chagecha is with the carbon shlamim. That's for the men. For the woman, it's big day tzavonim, colored clothing, and children, it's delicacies, it's candies and whatnot. That's the simcha. So what does it mean that the woman was the simcha? There's no din of simcha. Look at the Taisvis, top Taisvis. The mechayva ime b'simcha, the mother who's mechuyev in simcha brought him up. Pirish Rashi, the perikamid the kedushin, gabe isha baila misamcha Bavel in Bavel the big day tzavonim and Beretz Yisrael the big day pishtan. V'hachamashma the b'shalmei simcha mari. So in other words, Taisus has a problem over here with Rashi. Rashi seems to go ahead and be in conflict. The Rashi over there in Kedushin seems to say the simcha is as I just expounded upon. It was in the clothing, on the jewelry, right? And over here it seems to say no. There's a mitzvah of being a simcha, right? So if you look at Rashi, it's very meduyak. I found it in the Sifta, but greater than that, my son Moshe called me up with this diak. He liked the diak very much. If you look at Rashi, mechayve b'simcha, the fourth line down, la'lois l'regel u'lismoyach b'chag im baila. The al simcha nitztavu noshim d'chsev v'samachta ato beisecha. In other words, there is a din of simcha, but l'chayra u'lismoyach b'chag im baila. What do you mean? What is with im baila? If it was within herself, then she doesn't have to be with her husband. But no, she's accompanying her husband. There's an Indian of how can a husband be simcha without his wife? There's an Indian of imbaila. So that's what, even though Rashi may hold the etzim kiyum of the simcha is al yedei the big day tzavainim, but nonetheless she's going to be in Yerushalayim with her husband. Thus, she would have brought the child up, and then the shaila of what? Of being oila from that point in onwards. What? So how does Tosfos reconcile? Tosfos has no problem. Tosfos says that. Tosfos never said it's big day tzavainim. Rashi did. No, but okay, so Tosfos says Perish Rashi, right? Good.
And the Indian of chinuch goes on the father and the mother.
It doesn't say chinuch.
No, but chinuch.
It doesn't. Okay, the chinuch mother and father is a big raid. And then also, one second. Yes, the kasha. No, yeah. Well, the first part again, we made the diak. If you go look it back at Beis Amid Aleph, if you look at Beis Amid Aleph, Rashi on the fourth line down, where it gets thin. We made the diak even on the mother lechancha b'mitzvahs. In addition, we saw when we did Masech the Sukkah by Hilni Amalka, she had the kids in the Sukkah with her. Yeah. So the chinuch is, but the chinuch of the mother is that she has to give him the chinuch that he's going to be mechuyev later on, not what she is, right? That means if she's this is not to do with chinuch. This is the simcha with the husband. There's nothing to do with chinuch. Nothing to do with chinuch. Zero. This has to do with the shaila of simcha. Fred Tosfos Akasha. The Gemara assumes that the woman's up there because why is she up there? If her simcha is with clothing, she can be with clothing and bubble. It's nothing to do with chinuch. The shaila of chinuch is at which point in time does chinuch check in vis-a-vis the child, but not the chiyuv. Shaila is, how do you have this mitzias? The chayra, if the child is old enough to accompany from wherever they live to Yerushalayim, so it's a moot point, the machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, right? If he's old enough to go from that point to that point. And for the Gemara, he's not old enough to get to that point. Why? Because his mother brought him up. Now, if once they're up there, there's a shaila which level he's holding at. Guys, we're good? Okay, good. Says the Gemara. That's base Hillel. Heishiv Rabbi Tachas Beis Hillel the Rabbi Shammai. Rabbi is asking on Beis Hillel to Beis Shammai Shita riding on his shoulder. It says V'chana loy also. Okay, now just the background over here. Were you all familiar? It's the Haftarah on Rosh Hashanah. There was a man Elkanah. He was the god Ladar. He had two wives, Chana and Penina. Penina had 7 children. Chana had no children, and Chana was not in a good way. Chana went up. She went to Shiloh and she davened, and Hashem answered her, and she gave him a child. She had made a neder that this child is going to be given to Hashem. At the age of 2, the child was given to HaKadosh Baruch to Hashem, to Eli HaKoyen, and that child, of course, was Shmuel Haramasi. That was the great Navi Shmuel. Now, after she gave birth, so Elkanah said, "Let's bring him up," right? And this is the dialogue. The Chana also, Chana did not go up. Ki Amar Isha, she told her husband, Ad Yigomel Hanar, wait till the child is weaned, that's 2 years old, V'hevi Osav, and then we'll bring him up. Okay, now, for Shmuel, the Yachal Lirkev Al Kseifa Shalav Have, at this point in time, Shmuel was old enough to go ahead and ride on his father's shoulder. So Kasha, if there's a din of chinuch, and once you're able to ride on the shoulder, according to Beis Shammai, why would Shmuel say? Why would Chana say no? So Amalei, so said Enfid the Beis Shammai, the words of Beis Shammai, Avua, Amalei Avua, or Amalei Abaya. Let's Abaya. And it'll be a question. Chana Gufa Miloi Mechayva B'Simcha. Was Chana not mechuyev by herself to go up? Ella, what are you going to say? Chana Mifankusa. You say Rasa Chazi Bei B'Shmuel. Chana saw that Shmuel was a very fragile delicacy at this time. You know, his physical state was one that would not be able to endure the trip. And she thought about therefore it didn't send them up. In other words, really in a normal situation, there would be a din of chinuch. This was unique. This was a unique din. This was a unique din. Okay, so the dialogue. Beis Shammai says the child of chinuch vis-a-vis this halacha being oil l'regel is riding on his shoulder. Frag the Gemara, Shmuel clearly was old enough to ride on the shoulder, so why didn't Chana let Elkanah bring him up? And for the Gemara, because of his delicate nature. Okay, now the Turi Even again. The Turi Even is a bomb, guys. There's no. When it comes to the Shagas Aryeh, the Turi Even, the Gvuras Ari are all the same person, and the Avnei Miluyim, no. Excuse me, not the Avnei Miluyim. They're all the same person. The Gross said that on the Turi Even that he was his equal in Nigla. Meaning in the revealed parts of the Torah, the Vilna Gaon said on the Shagas Aryeh he was his equal. So we have a sefer called Turi Even. It's on the Chagigah, and his kashas are in the world of yeshiva they're called bombs. And here he has a bomb kasha, guys. The din of chinuch is the rice of the Rabbanan. It's the Rabbanan clearly. Look at the din. It's the Rabbanan. We had a Gemara. The kol zechurcha the Rabbi says a katanim. Fred the Gemara chinuch katanim is chayiv. Says Gemara smachta ba'almet. Chinuch is there before she Gemara. Says Gemara. Aval mekan ve'elach afal bisha einu chayiv ben atayra. Says Rashi. Rashi beis amid aleph. Guys, very important. This is marmokan. Rashi beis amid aleph. The same Rashi that we just did with Yankel. Aval mekan ve'elach afal bisha einu chayiv ben atayra. For chinuch hitilu chachamim alav ve'limay. Good. Now, most of the takanas of Chachamim were done, guys, during Bayis Sheni. Most of the takanas of Chachamim were during Bayis Sheni. This is before Bayis Rishon. This is before David. This is before Shlomo. Maybe there's no din of chinuch. What's your kasha? Frag the Shagas Aryeh, guys, a bomb. We're assuming there's a din of chinuch, and therefore, if Shmuel was if Chana was mechuyev or Kana was mechuyev to mechanechim and being oila to ride on the shoulder, he would have sent him. Maybe there was no din of chinuch at all there. So what's the Gemara's kasha? Most of the chinuch began the Rabbanon in the time of Bayis Sheni. This is way before. Maybe there's no din of chinuch. Maybe there's this kasha. I found in the Mesifta. It was asked by the Mesifta. The Nitziv comes to answer the kasha. He gives two terutzim, one really, really sophisticated teretz and one really simple teretz. The simple teretz, we'll go with the simple teretz. He says simply that even if there was no din of chinuch midarabanon, the gadol hador elkanah would be mechanech his son. In other words, the whole idea of chinuch is something that you don't. Every father feels. Even, in other words, when you have a child, none of you. I mean. You say, I have a din of chinuch, I'll teach my child. There's a natural inclination to teach the child the right thing, right? There's a natural inclination to teach the child. So the Gadol Hador certainly would go ahead and teach him the right thing to do. That's his easy teretz. The other teretz is like the Shittas of Rambam, and the Rambam learns kol zechurcha. There's a mitzvah to bring up all your males. So it has nothing to do with chinuch whatsoever. It has nothing to do with chinuch whatsoever. It has to do with Yayor calls zechurcha. All your males should come along with you. So therefore, he would have to bring him up because he was a male. But then what's the Gemara's kasha? It's a din chinuch. Okay, so it's not a din chinuch. But anyway, l'chol hapachas. That.
How can he take Shmuel away from his mother if he's still nursing?
Right. So that again. So the mother would come along, but it said the mother could come along because the Gemara said to go ahead and the Gemara asked the kasha. Doesn't she have a din of simcha? Right, and the Gemara answers that what he was too delicate to go travel, so not.
He lived in a friend
He lived in that wasn't far away. And then there's also Torah over there, guys, about the din of being oila l'regel. Did it exist during Mishkan Shiloh? This isn't what the Makam Asher. This is not the place where Hashem chose to go ahead. This is Mishkan Shiloh. So maybe there is no din of being other regular at all. Now this the Ramban in Re'eh, I have it over here in my Ksafim. The Ramban in Re'eh declares the Shaila. Is there a din of being oil regel by Mishkan Shiloh, by not the Mishkan? And l'chayra, what's the Ramban Shaila? You have a mafurish Gemara that there is a din, or else what's the Gemara talking about? What's the Gemara talking about? Asking this, why didn't Elkanah, if he could ride on the shoulder, bringing him up to Mishkan Shiloh? If there's no din of Oil Regel, what's the Gemara's kasha? So what's the Ramban suffix? So Levi Gelfish answered, I asked him this question many years ago. Levi wanted a taina that even the Ramban, even if they were noig to go up, it wasn't al zachiyav. It was, they did it because obviously there's an inyan of 3 times a year going to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We spoke out the machloikis between the Rambam and the Ramban, that the Kabbanis, the Bisman Bomis, they're separate. So the Kabbanis were, for then, Bomis were permitted, but when there's a central meeting place, everyone would come. So the Mishkan Shiloh, if that svara exists, Mishkan Shiloh existed for 369 years. So therefore, maybe it's a svara. Now, take it a step farther. So I don't know. I'm throwing this out. This is just my own stuff. So, and even if this, maybe the Ramban is only mesupikly in Mishkan Shiloh, but maybe when it comes to the other Mishkanais, maybe there wouldn't be a din because it wasn't a central meeting place. It wasn't a central meeting place. That's why bombers were permitted. So maybe by Nova Givon or Gilgal, there was no din of being a regular. Ken Zain. Again, I don't know. Just food for thought. What? Well, we'll see about the Kabbanis in a second. We'll see the whole daf about the Kabbanis.
You'd be going up to the mountain. You think you go to Yerushalayim, Harabayis. And in Mishkan, you're not going up.
That's the lush we use because Yerushalayim is not a high place, but it's lav dafka to define. It means the purpose. If it was a low place, you go to a low place too. Oila just happens to me. It happens to be its terminology, but the concept behind it of going ahead to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you know, to thank him for. Okay, says the Gemara Vaita. Boy, Rav Shimon, cotton chigar, a cotton that is a limb, is lame. L'divrei Beis Shammai, according to the words of Beis Shammai, v'suma l'divrei shneim, and a blind person according to both of them, mahu. Is there a din of them going up? Now, hechidami. Ilaim b'chigar sheni yachal ispashet. It's a chigar that is not going to get better. V'suma sheni yachal ispateach, and a suma that eyes will remain, he'll remain blind. Hashta gadol pata, cotton me boy. The din of a cotton can't be better than the gadol. And if the gadol will be potter, if he's lame, he's not mechuyev. If he's assuming he's not mechuyev, so certainly what? A cotton in the same scenario would not be mechuyev. So it must be bechiga sheyachal ispashet. He could get better. The suma sheyachal ispateach, and a blind child that would regain his eyesight. What's the din? In other words, if the din of riding on the shoulders, your chiger or suma, we spoke even leading according to Beis Hillel, my. Some Rabbi kol heichad the gadol mechayim midaraisa cotton. I mean the chanchem lei midrabanan. Anytime a gadol is mechayim midaraisa, there's a din of chinuch for a cotton midrabanan, the openly midrabanan, and kol heichad the gadol pata midaraisa midrabanan cotton ami poifer. So whatever in that scenario, right? There'd be no shaila, right? Now I just tell you that there's Rashi over here, cotton me boy. Look at this Rashi. Here's the reason for chinuch according to Rashi. Hala ein chinuch cotton ela kedei lehan higay sheyisaruch, that he should be habitually acher min hagay, that he should be accustomed to go in a certain way. The shegadol when he gets older. The kimin shezeh potter l'shegadol lamli chinuch. Since this child is going to be potter because he's lame or because he can't see, what would be the purpose of chinuch? It's interesting. Rashi says the purpose of chinuch is to, like you always thought, is to teach a child what to do. I shared with you the Maritz Chias in it's either Chav Gimel or Chav Zayin in Nazir, in Masech the Nazir. He says wonderfully to me. He said the reason why you teach a child mitzvahs is that they shouldn't come overload all at once. They can't overload all at once. They can't. Mom and you, the Yetzer Tov comes in. I love that. I love that bar mitzvah speech. Mazel tov on getting a Yetzer Tov. So why all the bar mitzvah kids go crazy? I love that. I love that speech. I would edit that speech out. I don't want to hear about. I told anyone who speaks about bar mitzvahs, the word Yetzer Tov comes with the rap. Anyway, so that's the vart. So there's a vart of you shouldn't have an overload. So you go ahead wide and you. So the Maritz Chias L'chayra is in not in the same signun as Rashi. Okay, says the Gemara Vaita. Beis Shammai Yoimrim. Now the second part of the Mishnah, the last part of the Mishnah is we describe three sets of Gabbanis, guys. Let's go back to the Hakdama. One, the Oilus Re'iyah. Two, the Shalmei Chagigah. And three, the Shalmei Simcha. The first two are necessary. Everyone brings them. The question is, you bring them the first day, whether we had a machlokes and beitza, whether you bring you can't eat. There's no chel nefesh by the oila, and the shlamim is muktzah. So we had that of Shaila Beisham Beisil machlokes there. You might remember, then you have tashlumin, all 7 days to bring it, and question is, and Shalmei Simcha you bring to eat meat. Now here's the question: which costs more? What do you spend more money on the oila or on the shlamim? So that was machlokes. Beis Shammai said you spend more money on the oila. You spend 2 ma'os on the oila, the 6 ma in a dinar, or a third of a dinar, and according to and on the you spend 1 ma on the shlamim, and Beis Hill said the opposite. You spend 2 ma on the shlamim and 1 ma on the oila. So that's the machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel that the Gemara now will go ahead and try to explain their different shittas. That's going to be the remainder of the share is on those the points. Again, Beis Shammai is saying you spend more money on the oila. Beis Hillel is saying you spend more money on the shlamim. Beis Shammai yomim hariyah, the carbon oilus reiyah shtei kesef, and the Shalmei Chagigah is 1 ma kesef. Tana Rabbanan. Beis Shammai yomim hariyah shtei kesef, v'chagigah ma kesef. Why? Shariya oila kula legvaya. The re'iyah goes totally to Hashem. Gevaya means HaKadosh up and high. Goes totally to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mashen came Chagigah. The Chagigah is a shlamim. It's divided among what? Three. The Bnei Shalom gets the imurim. The Kohen gets the chaz of the shoik. That's the right foot and the chest. And the Baal gets the rest of the carbon. In addition, another reason why you spend more money on the oila, we find by the atzeres, by shvuas, you bring oilus and shlamim. Guys, you're going to bring 10 shlamim. You're going to bring 7 sheep, 2 rams, and 1 ox, and you're going to bring 2 shlamim on atzeres. You're going to bring 2 shlamim. Those are called shalmei. Those are the shnei kfasim that accompanied the shtei lechem. They were unique because they were kachei kadashim. We won't discuss that now. Sheriba ben akosev ba'oiloi soisim b'shlamim. By shvuas, when you had guys bringing oilus and shlamim, you bought 10 oilos and you bought 2 shlamim. So therefore, you see that what it's more, I guess, more chashiv an oila. More, I said, you bring 10 oilos and 2 shlamim. So the Mela says Beis Shammai. That's the reason. One reason the oila goes totally to Hashem, and 2, when in Shavuos where you brought both oilos and shlamim, you see you brought more oilos than shlamim. Beis Hillel Aimrim Hariyah ma kesef. The oil is only 1 ma kesef. The Chagigah is shtei kesef, and the Chagigah is 2. Why? Chagigah yeshna lefnei hadibur. The Chagigah was brought before Matan Torah. Mashen came be'iyah, which wasn't brought before Matan Torah. So for this, to understand this, we have to see a pasuk inside. If you have pasuk on the side, you have a chumash. Is that a chumash? Please be a chumash. Yes, it's a chumash. Okay, look at Shmos Chaf Daled Hey. Shmos Chaf Daled Hey. If you have a Gemara. Well, you have a chumash, not a Gemara. Not this day. You'll understand it. Says Vayikach Moshe. Vayichlev Moshe is called the Hashem. Vayashkim Baboike. Vayivim Mizbeach. Vayishlach Esnare Bnei Yisrael. He sent for the Bechayrim. Vayalu Oilos. They brought up Oilos. Vayizbechu Zvachim Shlomim Hashem Parim. And they brought Zvachim Hashem Parim. So you see that what? This is before Matan Torah. Ein Muktam Ha'ucha B'Torah. Even though his Pashas B'Spotim takes place after Pashas Yisro, there's no set order to the Torah, and therefore it says, look, they brought Shlamim. It says they brought Oilus also. The Gemara is going to ask that as a kasha in a second, but they brought Shlamim. So since the Shlamim and the Chagigah is a Shlamim was before the Dibur, it's more chashiv than the Oilus Re'iyah, which was not before the Dibur. That's Beis Hillel's reasoning. One more time. Beis Hillel Re'iyah ma kesef, Chagigah shtei kesef, shechagigah yeshna lefnei adibur, mashen came bere'iyah. V'oid, another reason, matzinu b'nisiyim the kabbanis of the Nesiim in Pashas Naso, the day that they were mechanech the Chanukas Abayis, they brought Sheriba Behem HaKosev B'Shlamim. They brought many more shlamim. They brought 204 shlamim. Yaisim Ba'Oilas, they only brought 36 oilas. So you see that what? Giving the numbers. You want to pay the numbers. You, Beis Shammai, wanted to pay the numbers going from Atzeres, saying 10 versus 2. Guess what? I got 204 versus 36. So two reasons. One was in terms of numbers, it was more. And in terms of Lefnei Adiba, it was more. That was the Chashivas. Now, Ubesil my time Aloi Amri Kebei Shammai. You said the reason, right? Anyway, the Ka'amr Re'iyah Adifa, the Oila Kula Gavaya, Adrabba. Chagigah Adifa, the Espesh Te Achilois. The Chagigah has 2 Achilois. It has Achilas Adam and Achilas Mizbeach. The Oila only has 1 Achila, the Achila of the Mizbeach. Mashain came by the carbon what? Of the carbon of Shlamim. You have 2 Achilois. We describe the burning of the Imurim on the Mizbeach as Achila. And you have Achilas Adam by the Kayinated and the Balated. Uda Ka'armit Neilif Me'atzeres and now Beis Hillel coming to answer the Svara of Beis Shammai. First of all, that you said that the oil is more choshev because it's eaten. I'd rather have 2 eatings than 1 eating, right? Avrami, better have 2 eatings than 1 eating. And by the Shlamim, you have 2 eatings. What did you say about Atzeres 2 versus 10? Atzeres done in carbon. No, done in carbon yachid, carbon yachid, vein done in carbon yachid, carbon sibor. You have a choice to go ahead and make a comparison between the carbon yachid, the carbon of an individual, and the carbon sibor and a communal carbon. You're comparing what? The shlamim of the chage, the shlamim of the chag, the chagigah, which is the carbon of an individual, and you want to go ahead and compare it to what? To the carbon of atzeres. The carbon of atzeres are carbon of siba. Those oilas. Those oilas are carbon of siba. So again, it's not a good comparison. You know that you said that what that the Chagigah was before Matan Torah, the oil was also before Matan Torah. With the Karmen Neilif Minisiyim, done in Dover and Noig L'Doiris, Midava Noig L'Doiris. Let's go ahead and I'd rather learn from that Seres, which is going to be Noig for future generations every Shavuos, rather than the Nisiyim, which was a one-trick pony. It was a one-shot deal. They ain't done in Dover and Noig L'Doiris, Midava Shen Noig L'Doiris. Or it's still in my time. Okay, now so very good. So guys, let's recap. We have Beis Shammai saying 2-1, oil wins. We have Beis Hillel saying 2-1, Shlamim wins. We have Beis Shammai saying the reason is what? Is because it's Legavaya, right? One reason why it's Legavaya, and when it came to Atzeres, you have a ratio of what of 10 to 2. Says Beis Hillel, no. We said the carbon re'iyah, the Shami Chagigah was the carbon re'iyah was before Matan Torah. Mashen came to Oila. And when it comes to numbers, then the Siyam, he had much more Shlamim. Each one did not like the other one, right? Each one did not like the other one. They didn't like, Beis Shammai didn't like Beis Hillel because you don't learn Dava, something with the Doiris, and they disagreed about that only the Shalmei Chagigah was re'iyah. He said the Oila re'iyah also was an Oila re'iyah. And Beis Hillel did not like that what? That first of all, that he didn't like from Beis Shammai. What? The numbers, what? Yeah, he didn't like Beis Shammai. That they said first of all, there's 2 achilas, and second of all, he didn't like the fact that you're learning a carbon yachid from a carbon of a tzibur. Okay, now the Gemara is going to l'chayra based upon the pasuk, guys. There's not only shlamim, there's oil. Again, look if you have the pasuk of the Gemara, look at him. If not, here it is. It says, what did he do? It says he brought up by the Zvachim. They brought up oilos. It says, "Vayishlach esnar bnei Yisrael vayalu oilos, vayizvchu zvachim shlamim." So just like the pasuk says they brought shlamim, the pasuk says they brought oilos. So what are you telling me that lefnei adiba they only brought what shalmei chagigah? It's they brought oilos also before. It says in the pasuk they brought oilos. They said in the pasuk they brought oilos. Young men, I really don't like when guys walk back and forth. Okay, you can finish up, but again, the shir is going on. Please in the future. Thank you. Okay, not a problem. Says the Gemara like this. Okay, says the Gemara. Ubeis Hillel Maishna Chagigah the Yeshna Lefnei Adibor. What's the difference? The Chagigah that was before the Dibor, the Chsiv Vayizvchu Zvachim Shlamim, Riyanami Ksiv Vayalu Oilos. It says in the pasuk they brought Oilos. And for the Gemara, Kasavre Beis Hillel, Oila Shekrivu Yisrael b'Midbar Oilas Tamid Hu Have. The oila they brought in the midbar, this oila is not an oilas re'iyah. It's the carbon tamid brought every day in the morning and the afternoon. The oilas tamid baiker, but oilas bein abayim. But it's not the re'iyah. That they didn't bring. The oilas re'iyah they didn't bring. So that the fact that it meant oil in the pasuk is not an oilas re'iyah. Only it's an oilas tamid, and therefore the only thing they brought before Matan Torah vis-a-vis re'iyah was the shlamim. Beishamai Savri, Beishamai, who said 1 second, they brought oilus also, is oilus shekriv yisrael b'midbar, oilus riyah have. It was an oilus riyah. So you have machloikus Beishamai, Beisilal Gufa, and the oil of the pasuk. When the pasuk says vayalu oilus, Beisilal says the carbon tamid, and Beishamai says an oilus riyah. Memela, Beishamai says that an oilus, that you wanted a time the Shalmei Chagigah was only before Matan Torah. That's not a time because the oil also was before Matan Torah. But Basil says no, that oil was an oilus tamid, and therefore there was no oilus real from the Matan Torah, which gives the Shalmei Chashivas that the Shlomim Chagigah was brought back before Matan Torah. Yeah, they brought oilus.
So it's something more.
Vayalu oilus esnachta, vayizvchu zvachim shlomim, and they shechted shlomim. It's going on weiter. It's going on weiter. Okay, so says the Gemara. So now, guys, so we have established that Beis Hillel says they didn't bring the carbon tamid, and Beis Shammai said they brought the carbon tamid. Yeah, good. Now, Beis Shammai changed the girsa of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer, guys, was Shamuti. We know that by now. We do Pancherim, or was the Talmud of Beis Shammai. Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Shmuel, Kula Svirlahu. They're all of the opinion that Oila Shekriv Yisrael b'Midbar, the Oila that Yisrael brought in the Midbar. Oilus Riyah have it. It was an Oilus Riyah. It was not an Oilus Tamid. It was an Oilus Riyah. It was just being Oila the Mishkan. So you have 3 verses. 3 is like a Hall of Fame of Tanoim, right? The Hall of Fame. This is like a Hall of Fame of Tanoim. They all hold Oila Shekrivu Yisrael b'Midbar, Oilus Tamid have. The oila that Yisrael was makrav in the midbar was an oilus tamid. Okay, so Beis Shammai again, Beis Shammai, Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Yossi Aglili was what? It was the re'iyah, and Beis Hillel, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Yossi Aglili, it was a what? It was a tamid. Now, says the Gemara, each one we go through each shita. Beis Shammai Hodam Morin. Beis Shammai, he just said that what oilus was oilus re'iyah. Rabbi Shmuel the Tanya. Rabbi Shmuel Oimer. Klolis nemer b'Sinai. By Sinai, the mitzvah were given in a general manner. In other words, they would say there's something called the carbon oila, tamid. How do you bring it? What you have to do to bring it? How you slaughter it? How you receive the blood? How you spitz the blood, the specifics were not given at Sinai. The klal of the mitzvah was given, but the specific performance of the mitzvah was not. Says the Gemara in the Amid Beis, upratos, and the specifics ba'oil moyed. That was taught by Moshe when the Mishkan was established, and what we call the oil moyed. When the Mishkan was established, what we call the oil moyed, that's when the specifics were given. Okay, so now, that is going to lead to us that Rabbi Shmuel says that what? That the oiler brought was an oilus re'iyah. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Klolus upratis nemra b'Sinai. They were all given by Sinai, the general and the specifics. V'nishnu ba'oil moyed, they were repeated in the oil moyed when the Mishkan was established. V'nishtalshlu ba'arvis moyav, and they were three-peated when for Mishnah Torah before Moshe was nifta and Pashas Devarim. V'i sal kedaitach. Oila shekriv Yisrael b'Midbar, oilus tamid have. If you would think that the oila that was brought in the midbar is an oilus tamid, mi'ika midi the meikara loy boy hefshit v'nituach, something that initially did not require skinning and dismembering. Guys, the oila specifically gets burnt on the mizbeach, everything. In other words, guys, look at me. Zoom, guys, look at me. On a carbon, usually the part that goes to Hashem is called the emurim. They're innards. They're the two kidneys, the diaphragm, the fats, all the stuff. But they're not the actual limbs burnt. The oila, the actual, besides the imurim, the actual limbs are burnt. But you didn't throw on a whole animal, you dismembered it. That's called nituach. But before you dismembered it, you took the skin, and the skin went to the kahanim. So now, if you're telling me that generally, so you were told at Sinai what? Guys, you were told at Sinai that there were klolim, that there's going to be a carbon tamid. But exactly what to do with it, you weren't given yet. Good. So that means that if you're going to tell me that the oil in the midbar that was bought was a carbon tamid, that means the original tamid was what? Burnt whole? They didn't know what to do, right? They didn't know what to do. Initially, it does not need skinning and dismembering. In the end, you're going to require hefshev v'nituach. In other words, it changed completely. Ella, it must be that it wasn't the oilus tamid. It must have been, it's the oilus re'iyah. Again, one more time. Here's a given that Beis Shammai says when the pasuk that we're describing in Mishpatim, in Perek Hey, Perek Dalet pasuk Hey, that pasuk is speaking about the oilus re'iyah.
Miriam at the office of Dr. Press. How are you? Good. I'm going to confirm Yitzi's appointment for Thursday.
We got Miriam Press confirming an appointment for Thursday, for Yitzi for Thursday. We'll tell Yitzi. You heard it. I heard it. I don't know how she broke in. Miriam, get out. Okay, it's my sister-in-law. No, stop. Okay, guys, listen. So guys, very geschmack. It's a lam de shariah. It's a lam de shariah. Listen to lam de shariah. We have a pasuk that says oila and says shlomim. Shlomim, clearly everyone is holding that word. It's a shalmei re'iyah. Everyone says the shlomim of Chagigah. The oila we have machlokes, and what's the machlokes? What was that oila? So Beis Shammai said it was an oilas re'iyah, and saying Rabbi Yishmael also held it was oilas re'iyah. Now Yishmael never said it. We're inferring it from a din that it must be an oilas re'iyah. What's the inference? Guys, listen, what's the inference? If this is Rabbi Yishmael's of the opinion that at Har Sinai they got the mitzvah, but they didn't get the exact how to perform the mitzvah. So this oila that had to be, it had to be in a general sense, right? Because the oil moye, the Mishkan wasn't built yet, so they didn't get specifics. So how they bring this oila? They must have brought it whole. Without skinning it, without the smell, because they didn't know. Now, if you're telling me it's an oilus tamid, how could it be that one, you bring the tamid this way, and then after you get the clothing, you're going to bring it another way? Ella, it must be what? It wasn't a tamid. It must have been, it was oilus re'iyah. You'll ask the obvious question. The oilus re'iyah also, after Matan Torah, also is going to need what? Dismembering, nituach, and skinning. And now l'chayr, you're going to bring it whole. That's not a kasha, because the whole statement of nituach vehefshid was stated in the parsha of oilus tamid. In other words, it's not just that it was an oila. It's not stam an oila. The specifics were stated by the tamim. They weren't stated by the oilus re'iyah. So it's not a kasha. That's a Tosfos answer it. So therefore, we're inferring that Rabbi Yishmael must be of the opinion that what? That it was an oilas re'iyah and not a tamid. Continues the Gemara. Now, Rebbe Eliezer, again, we changed the Gersa. The third person, Rebbe Eliezer, the Tanya. Oilus tamid hasuya b'Har Sinai. The oilus tamid that was brought by Har Sinai. Rebbe Eliezer, Omer ma'aseh nemru Sinai. How to bring it was said by Sinai. V'hi atzmalei karva, but it itself was not brought. So in the midbar, they didn't bring the carbon tamid. So you have three shittas, guys, of who holds oilus re'iyah: Rabbi Yishmael, Beis Shammai, and Rebbe Eliezer. Now, what does Rabbi Kiva Omer? Rabbi Kiva says it wasn't oilus tamid. What does he say? Rabbi Kiva Omer, karva, they brought it, v'shuvlei paska, and they never stopped bringing it. They started bringing it, they never stopped bringing it. Elmani mekayim azvachim u'minchos hagashlim b'midbar abayim shana. The Navi and Amos says in a lashon of Tema, the Zvachim and the Menachas that you brought all the years, where were they? You know, there's mashma that Bnei Yisrael did not bring it. So how can Rabbi Akiva say that Bnei Yisrael brought the carbon oilos tamid? When you see Hashem is admonishing Klal Yisrael, he's saying, "Did you bring for me karbanos all the years?" According to Rabbi Akiva, yeah, you did. No. And for the Gemara, shifta shalevi shlayavda by the zarehena krifu. They couldn't bring the carbon oilos tamid, guys, because they were like in Shamta as a result of the chait of the egel. They were like in Cherem. You had a shiloh where the person Cherem can bring a carbon or not. So therefore, but Shevet Levi, which did not do the chait of egel, they brought it. So, but Einachinami was brought. Now, Beis Hillel Hodam Maran. Beis Hillel said the oilo was the oilus tamid, and therefore only the carbon that pasuk that's describing is what is an oil is a shalmei re'iyah. The oil is a tamid. Rabbi Akiva Hanami Damaran that he just said. He said that what that they started bringing it and they never stopped. The third party was Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says also it was an oilus tamid. The Tanya Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer Shalosh mitzvos nitztabi Yisrael ba'olasam l'regel. Right. There are three mitzvahs that Bnei Yisrael are commanded when the oil regel. What are the three mitzvahs, guys? Re'iyah, the oilus re'iyah, the Chagigah, the Shalmei Chagigah, the Simcha, and the Shalmei Simcha. Now, beautifully, guys, we're going to see. Yesh b're'iyah she'em b'shteihem. The re'iyah is something that the Chagigah and the Simcha don't have. The yesh b'Chagigah she'em b'shteihem that the re'iyah and the Simcha don't have. Yesh b'Simcha she'em b'shteihem that the re'iyah and the Chagigah don't have. Yesh b'riyah shem b'shteyah. What does riyah have over the Chagigah and the Simcha? She'ariyah oila kula l'gavaya. It's totally burnt. Mashen came b'shteyah. Both the Shalmei Chagigah and the Shalmei Simcha are eaten by individuals as well. Yesh b'Chagigah mashen b'shteyhem. The Chagigah has what that the Simcha and the riyah don't have. She'Chagigah yeshna l'fnei adibor. That's Uriah, guys. That the Chagigah was before the dibor. Who is saying this? Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Now, if he said the oil was an oilus re'iyah, then he wouldn't be saying it. So obviously, it must be an oilus tamid. That's the what we need is this one line. Let's go over it one more time. Yesh b'Chagigah. There isn't the carbon Chagigah. Mashen came by re'iyah and by simcha. What is that? Shechagigah yeshna l'fnei hadibor. Mashen came b'shteyah, meaning the oil was not l'fnei hadibor. So the oil wasn't the dibor. What's the oil of the pasuk, guys? It must be an oilus tamid and not an oilus re'iyah, and that's the raya. Yesh b'simcha mashein b'shteyem. You have simcha that's what that doesn't have by the Chagigah and the re'iyah. Shesimcha neheges be'anoshim u'v'noshim. Even though in mitzvah zeshish is man grama, we have a limud that what of the chagoysim. There's the thing of a chag that women also should be. Again, this is even if you're going to hold that women are only in the clothing. It seems over here that no, there's a din of simcha by as well. The mitzvah of simcha is known by women as well. Okay, so now we're set up. We have on one side Beis Shammai, Rabbi Yishmael, and Rabbi Eliezer. On the other side we have Beis Hillel, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and what? And Rabbi Akiva. So now what was the svart? Now Rabbi Yishmael never said it, right? We inferred from Rabbi Yishmael that it must be that it was noilus re'iyah, or else you'll have two types of carbon tamid. You'll have a tamid that did not have hefshif and nituach, skinning and dismembering, and then you'll have a tamid that did. Says that now, if I can disprove it, then I can disprove Rabbi Yishmael. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yishmael, my time kamuk mislaki beishamai. Abaya, why did you say that Rabbi Yishmael holds like beishamai that it was an oilus re'iyah? Because he sakatayt the oilus shekrivi so b'mir oilus tamid have me ikamidi me kara loy boy hefshit. 1 second. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Damar, Oila Shekri Yisrael Midbar, Oilas Tamid Have. Rabbi Yossi Aglili is of the opinion it was an Oilas Tamid. May Karolai by Hefshif and Ituach, Lebesayf by Hefshif and Ituach. The Tanya Rabbi Yossi Aglili Oimer, Oila Shekri Yisrael Midbar, Oila they bought in the Midbar, Aina two in Hefshif and Ituach did not require Hefshif and Ituach. If you ain't Hefshif and Ituach, you only have Hefshif and Ituach after what the Mishkan was built. So l'chayra, your whole riot to Rabbi Yishmael was making two different types of kabbanis. It's not a problem. There were two types of kabbanis. The tamid before Oyel Moed, before the establishment of the Mishkan, and the tamid after. The tamid before was brought tamid every day whole. And after the Oyel Moed, and they learned this halachas, then it was cut up and burnt what in parts. So therefore, according to that, Rabbi Yishmael, there's no raya that he held that it was not that it couldn't be an Oilus Tamid. Maybe it wasn't an Oilus Tamid. So the Gemara says what? Sama mikan Rabbi Yishmael. Take out Rabbi Yishmael. In fact, all that's left for Beis Shammai's support is his Talmud Rabbi Eliezer. But Einachinami Rabbi Yishmael could in fact hold that it was an oilus Talmud and not an oilus Riyah. Boy Rav Chisda, just to finish up the sugya. Haikra Heichiksiv. Now, how do you read this pasuk? Guys, how do you read this pasuk? Now, let's look at the pasuk again. Look at the pasuk inside. Again, we're in Perik Chaf Dalid. Pasuk Hey. We can read it one of two ways. Vayishtach esnare b'nei Yisrael vayalu oilois. And from what? From kfasim. They brought them up from sheep, because most oilers guys were sheep. It doesn't say sheep in the pasuk. We're interjecting. If you brought an oilah, it makes sense that it was a sheep. And then the pasuk continues, Vayizbechu zvachim shlamim laHashem parim. And you brought shlamim from parim, from oxen. Or no, Vayishtach es nari b'nei Yisrael vayalu oilus v'yizbechu zvachim shlamim laHashem parim. That the parim is not only going back on zvachim, on the shlamim, it's going back also on the first part of the pasuk on the carbon oilah. So that's the question: was the oilah a different animal or the same animal? That's what Rav Chisda shot. By Rav Chisda, Hai krohechi ksiv. Vayishtach es nari b'nei Yisrael vayalu oilah. Interject the word kvasim. Vayizbechu zvachim shlamim laHashem parim. Idilma idi parim have, or maybe they were both parim. L'may nafkamina mazucha amal lepisa timim. For the trup, where are you going to put this nachta? Where are you going to put the period? Are you going to put the period after oilais or not? Rav Acha brei the Rav Amar lo'oim hari. Here's another nafkamina. Lo'oimer, a person makes a neder. Hari like oila ka'oila shekrivu Yisrael b'midbar. I should bring an oila like what? Right, like in the midbar. Now, my parim. Did I bring parim and you have to bring a par? Like fasim havi or the sheep and you bring sheep. And to that, the Gemara answers teiku. It's tonight's Gemara.